Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a big courtroom victory for President Trump. A New York appeals court overturns a massive fine against the president, his family, and his company. Why a judge says the penalty went too far. Mariotsu at the White House. And President Trump is joining law enforcement officers in D.C. on a patrol tonight. Jason Blair has the latest on the federal crackdown on crime in the nation's capital. An American company in Ukraine is damaged after being hit by Russian drones and missiles. Arian Pozdar has how President Trump is responding amid peace efforts by the U.S. Taiwan has announced it will increase its military spending by 23% in response to President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy. Luis Martinez reports. And it was one of the most infamous murder cases of the 1990s. Now, more than 35 years later, the Menendez brothers are back before the justice system for their parole hearings after spending decades behind bars.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump declaring total victory today after a New York appeals court overturned a massive fine against him and his associates. NTD's Mariotsu has more from the White House.
Now you have the hottest country in the world. That's true. We have the hottest country anywhere in the world. Nobody close. And we did that in 6 months. It's going to get really good. Get ready.
President Trump today touting the accomplishments of his first 6 months in office and celebrating what he calls a total victory. That is, a New York appeals court is throwing out the $500 million fine brought by Attorney General Letitia James against the president, his family, and his company. The court is calling the $500 million fine excessive and in violation of the Eighth Amendment, which protects against unfair penalties. President Trump calls this a great win for America. He says, "These were all political trials in an effort to destroy my viability as a presidential candidate," adding that he admires the court's bravery in overturning what he calls an unlawful and disgraceful decision that hurt New York State businesses. President Trump is also blasting this case as election interference and saying that he faces other equally unjust cases. Justice David Friedman, one of the panel's 5 judges, says Attorney General Letitia James's ultimate goal was the derailment of President Trump's political career and the destruction of his real estate business. And Peter Navarro, the president's chief trade advisor, emphasizing that the ruling isn't just about President Trump or his family, but about American people and American businesses.
Letitia James is another one that belongs in jail. They totally destroyed American people's faith in our Justice Department. They can come for me, they can come for you.
Attorney General Letitia James's office says, despite today's decision, they will not be dropping the case. In her statement, James says she is seeking to ask New York's highest court to review the case to protect the rights of New Yorkers. But the White House calls James's actions a political crusade against President Trump, saying it is another, quote, failed skirmish in the discredited lawfare campaign against the president and his family. This is as the Department of Justice is launching a grand jury probe into Attorney General James. Reporting from the White House, Mariotsu, NTD News.
President Trump says the Republican Party is going to do everything possible to get rid of mail-in ballots. But what can the executive branch do to influence how Americans vote? Tune into NTD's Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to hear from former federal election commissioner Brad Smith. President Trump visited dozens of law enforcement agents at a U.S. Park Police facility in Washington, D.C. just moments ago. He's expected to join them on a patrol later this evening. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more on the federal crime crackdown in the nation's capital.
Washington, D.C. is on its 10th day of federal control of its police force. Attorney General Pam Bondi says that 77 arrests were made on Wednesday. That includes 24 made by ICE, and Bondi says 1 missing child was recovered. Bondi says the total number of arrests is at 630, with 86 guns seized. She says on X, quote, "Our mission to make D.C. safe again isn't slowing down." U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, says that her office will continue to prosecute cases.
As the president continues to make D.C. safe, we will continue to prosecute the cases, support the blue, and get those guns out of the hands of criminals.
While speaking in Georgia, Vice President J.D. Vance says he hopes other cities will be inspired by what's happening in Washington.
It turns out if you just go and arrest the bad guys, you can have cities and streets that are safe again. And we hope that people see what we're doing in Washington, D.C. and follow our example all across the country.
And according to the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police crime statistics, there have been no homicides in D.C. in the past week. The last times there were no homicides within a week were in May and March of this year and in August of 2024. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
As President Trump joins law enforcement to patrol the streets of D.C., what do everyday Americans think of the administration's crackdown on crime in the nation's capital? NTD's Sam Wong was out in Anacostia, a neighborhood with one of D.C.'s highest crime rates, to hear from the people.
Do you think more police presence is warranted in this neck of the woods?
Yes, I can confirm it. I'm happy because we have a very good president, Donald Trump.
If it cracks down on crime, I mean, I guess it can help, you know. Anything that stops crime down because we want the children to be safer and people to be safer.
I'm from D.C., born and raised, and I just don't see why we got to go through all this. And I just walk around everywhere, and I see them everywhere. I kind of get a little nervous.
The police takeover, it needs to be done. It's riddled with crime. It's riddled with all kind of social issues that need to be addressed. And you really do learn about raw life as it really is. It's not dressed up over here.
Just like an hour or two ago, I saw somebody getting arrested right here on the bus. Obviously, there's some kind of agitation going on, so they drag him out and arrested him. Have you seen any criminal activities going on around this neighborhood living here?
No criminal activities, but I see a lot of harassment from police.
We ain't got to be watched over by federal agents, because we are our own government. That's how I look at it. That's how I see it.
I mean, there is criminal activity, a lot of it, but it seems to be overlooked. I mean, a blind man can see it.
In D.C., a lot of gun shooting every day, even before Trump to be the takeover. I have been walking on the train, seeing a teenager with gun assaulting me.
How do you think the city has been handling this crime situation in the past before the police takeover?
My elementary school kids, they need some direction and guidance. It needs to be more on the foot patrol, more connection with the school, the churches, and the community.
As a Washingtonian, I think it needs to be stepped up a little more. Because I know that they can't be around all at one time, but something has to be done about that.
We have to obey the law because no one is above the law, and we have to obey the authority.
As Washington keeps pushing for peace in Ukraine, the fighting continues. Drones and missiles reportedly struck an American-owned factory in western Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the Ukraine update.
Citizens in Ukraine are dealing with the aftermath of Russian attacks on Thursday. Among the buildings hit was an American-owned electronics factory in western Ukraine. Authorities released these pictures showing the destroyed American plant. President Trump didn't directly comment on the attack on Thursday, but said Ukraine needs more weapons to fight back. Trump posted, "It is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. Joe Biden would not let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out?" Meanwhile, in the Ukrainian city of Lviv, one civilian is reported dead and 3 more injured after the reported Russian attacks.
I could not open the door. Neighbors were running around and looking for a tool to open my door. I got so scared, it was horrible.
At the same time, Washington and Kiev keep pushing for a meeting between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine. The Kremlin on Thursday said it only makes sense for the presidents to meet once they agree on the details of a possible peace deal.
With the understanding that all issues that require consideration at the highest level will be well worked out.
Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News on Wednesday that he doesn't agree with that notion.
We shouldn't say that they can't sit down until you've figured out every little detail. Sometimes them sitting down is what facilitates figuring out those details.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready for a meeting, now adding that if the Russians are not ready, we would like to see a strong reaction from the United States. Possible locations for the meeting are Geneva, Switzerland, and Budapest, Hungary. Hungary's foreign minister says Budapest is ready.
They can come to Hungary at any time. Give us an hour's notice and we guarantee fair, safe, and equal conditions for everyone.
Switzerland has been historically neutral, while Hungary has good relations with both the US and Russia. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The Trump administration's peace through strength foreign policy has realigned U.S. alliances to counter growing threats both in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more.
Just look at what took place during the last 4 administrations. Under George W. Bush, Russia invaded Georgia. Under Barack Obama, Russia took Crimea. Under Joe Biden, Russia invaded Ukraine. But under President Trump, Russia did not invade nor take anything. That's because Russia has always greatly respected President Trump and his peace through strength foreign policy approach.
The Trump administration argues that its peace through strength foreign policy is yielding results as it has in the past, and it is critical to face the greatest security threats of the present and future.
It has to be clear to all that Beijing is credibly preparing to potentially use military force to alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. We know, it's public, that Xi has ordered his military to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027.
In response to growing concerns from the Trump administration and the increasing threat from China, the government of Taiwan has announced it will increase its military spending by 23% to match current NATO ally military spending.
But thanks to President Trump, Asian allies should look to countries in Europe as a newfound example. NATO members are pledging to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, even Germany. So it doesn't make sense for countries in Europe to do that while key allies in Asia spend less on defense in the face of an even more formidable threat.
The Trump administration's efforts to bring the Ukraine war to an end respond to a growing assumption among U.S. allies on Beijing's plans to launch an attack on the Indo-Pacific theater.
Xi Jinping, the president of China and General Secretary of the Communist Party, before he would attack Taiwan, will first make a call into Moscow, his very junior partner in all of this, one Vladimir Putin, to ask him to keep us busy in this part of Europe. And this shows you that the transatlantic and the Indo-Pacific are getting more and more intertwined.
The Trump administration has also called on Japan, Australia, and South Korea to increase their military spending to deter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. It's also important to note that China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and India all spend more than any other U.S., NATO, or Indo-Pacific ally on military and defense. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, the next phase in the redistricting battle continues in California. State Democrats are pushing to redraw congressional lines. David Lamb has what lawmakers are saying about the response to Texas. President Trump is threatening to cut off federal funding to California schools over transgender policies. This comes months after Trump's executive order to ban males from female sports. Jack Bradley reports. And the Menendez brothers' murder case shocked the nation in the 1990s. Now, over 35 years later, the brothers are facing a parole board, hoping for freedom. Christina Corona brings us the update when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Vice President J.D. Vance made a stop in Peachtree City, Georgia today to promote the One Big Beautiful bill. He spoke on the importance of keeping factories in America and how the law will help America's working families. NTD's David Zhang was there to tell us more.
Vice President J.D. Vance spoke from a refrigeration factory on Thursday about how the Trump administration plans to bolster domestic industry and increase wages for Americans.
Put very simply, we're trying to make America great for Americans again.
Vance also touted the several ways he believes that the administration has helped the working families in the state of Georgia. He says the new tariffs will help keep industry in America.
This law means for you is that your take-home pay is going to go up over $10,000 over the next few years. What that means is that if you're working an hour of overtime, the federal government is going to keep its money the hell out of your pocket. Because if you're working hard, the government ought to leave you alone. Ain't that the truth?
Both houses passed the One Big Beautiful Bill by a very thin margin, and President Trump signed it into law on 4th of July this year.
I think it was a tremendous success. I mean, you look at in the One Big Beautiful Bill, you had tremendous tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. You look at what we did with the ICE, I mean, tremendous amount of funding, the most amount of funding for ICE ever in history.
So far, there seems to be a messaging competition going on between Democrats and Republicans, as Democrats are also making similar visits to battleground states to warn people about the law's impending cuts to Medicaid and SNAP.
It's a big thing because most families depend on that. And if the economy on both sides was better, then we wouldn't need food stamps.
The only people that we say should not get free government health care benefits are illegal aliens and those who refuse to try to even look for a job. It's very common sense.
This country is out of bounds with how much it overspends. So security is going to go bankrupt. I mean, this is their own statistics. I believe it's 2033 bankrupt. Nobody's addressing that.
We are going to bankrupt this country if we keep on giving the people's benefits, the people's Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security benefits to illegal aliens who have no legal right to be in this country and never paid into the system to begin with.
Many local residents do agree that bringing jobs back to America will help boost the local economy.
If you're building it here, if you're making it here, if you're producing it here, we are going to give you, and already have given you, a big fat tax cut. That's a good thing.
It's 89 degrees outside, a usual hot and humid summer day in Georgia. Fortunately, it's very cool and nice here inside a facility that manufactures industrial-grade refrigeration products. The event organizer told me that this is a reminder why we still need products built and made right here in the United States. Reporting from Peachtree City, David Zhang, NTD News.
The redistricting battle continues. California lawmakers have officially passed 3 bills that could pave the way for the Golden State to replace its existing congressional maps through 2030. The legislative package will allow for a special election in November for voters to decide on this issue. It's now heading to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk, where he's expected to sign it later today. This comes after the Texas House passed its own maps to add more Republican seats. NTD's David Lamb reports.
The maps are expected to give the Democrats 5 more seats in Congress. California Democrats must still convince voters to overturn the maps previously drafted by the Independent Redistricting Commission, a commission that voters first authorized to draw the lines in 2010 in California. Lawmakers say the new bills are a response to Texas's redistricting, which could give 5 seats to Republicans. California legislators who support the bills say it would even the field and counteract Texas and the Trump administration.
Let me be crystal clear. We don't want this fight, and we didn't choose this fight. But with our democracy on the line, we cannot and will not run away from this fight. We're here today because President Trump and Republicans in Texas and other states are attempting to redraw congressional districts mid-decade.
On the other hand, lawmakers who oppose the bills say it's like fighting fire with fire, and it could push aside what California voters voted for more than a decade ago, for an independent redistricting commission that draws the congressional lines in the state.
Finally, a point of order to Assembly Bill 604, which violates Article 21, Section 2E, which says, quote, districts shall not be drawn for purpose of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent political candidate or political party. It is my understanding that both the governor and members of the legislature have said that they have partisan goals behind these maps. For all 3 of these bills, I ask they be removed from the file immediately.
As for Texas, the Senate committee approved the revision, and there's a Senate floor vote on it Thursday night. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
President Trump threatens to pull funding from California school districts if they continue to allow males to compete in women's sports. That's after a California girls volleyball team refused to compete against a team that had a transgender player. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
President Trump announcing Thursday that he would pull funding from any California school district that allows boys who identify as transgender to play in girls' sports. Public schools receive most of their funding through local and state sources, though a significant amount is given from the federal government. In February, Trump signed an executive order to strip federal funding from any school that allows men who say they're transgender to compete in women and girls' sports. The Trump administration sued California back in July for allowing transgender athletes to compete in girls' school sports, and Trump said that it violated federal anti-discrimination laws. Earlier this year, California Governor Gavin Newsom even split with the state's Democratic Party platform on this issue.
Would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness. So it's deeply unfair.
Would you speak?
But despite that, California's high school governing board allows transgender male athletes to compete in girls' sports. Last week, Riverside Poly High School announced its girls volleyball team forfeited to Jurupa Valley High School's team, which has a boy who identifies as a transgender girl playing for them. But the threat of pulling federal funding has worked on the college level. In April, Trump suspended $175 million in funding to the University of Pennsylvania for failing to adhere to the administration's transgender policies. Then, in July, the university took action, prohibiting men from competing in women's sports and stripping the championship medals of a transgender athlete, Leah Thomas, for competing as a male in women's swimming. But it's not an isolated case. At a college in upstate New York, for example, a male athlete broke several records that this female sprinter had set.
In that moment, I definitely felt very let down. My confidence plummeted. The coaches and administration were not speaking up about the issue. They were actually celebrating the athlete. And so I definitely felt abandoned.
As for California, a recent bipartisan survey by the Public Policy Institute of California found that a majority of state residents oppose men competing in women's sports. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Eric and Lyle Menendez are facing parole hearings this week after more than 30 years behind bars for the murder of their parents. Resentenced in May, the brothers are now eligible for release. NTD's Christina Corona has the latest.
The Menendez brothers, Eric and Lyle, were convicted in 1996 of murdering their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, inside their Beverly Hills mansion. The brothers claim the killings were in self-defense after years of abuse, but prosecutors argued the crimes were cold-blooded and financially motivated. In May, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Michael Jessic resentenced them, reducing their punishment from life without parole to 50 years to life. That ruling made them immediately eligible to seek parole. Eric, 54, appeared before a parole panel Thursday at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, while Lyle, 57, is scheduled to appear Friday. The board will review their prison behavior, psychological evaluations, and release plans. Supporters say the brothers have expressed deep remorse and contributed to prison programs, mentoring, and helping disabled inmates. But Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman says they have never fully accepted responsibility and continue to pose a risk to society.
If and when the Menendez brothers finally come clean and say that those lies that they've been telling for 35 years are just that, they're lies, then at that point, we believe they'll be qualified for parole. Until that happens, we believe they're not.
If parole is granted, the decision goes to Governor Gavin Newsom, who can affirm, reverse, or send it back. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, Israel returns to the negotiating table to free the hostages and end the war in the Gaza Strip. At the same time, Israeli forces continue with plans to take over the territory. Jason Perry reports. And Middle East Affairs analyst David Wormser joins us to discuss those latest developments after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Israel has now begun ceasefire talks to return the hostages and end the war in the Gaza Strip. This comes as Israeli forces continue their plans to take over the territory and defeat the Hamas terrorist group. NTD's Jason Perry brings the update.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday said he was meeting with military commanders to approve the plans for taking over Gaza City and defeating Hamas.
At the same time, I have issued instructions to begin immediate negotiations for the release of all our hostages and an end to the war on terms acceptable to Israel. Those two things, the defeat of Hamas and the release of all our hostages, go hand in hand.
His announcement comes just after Hamas agreed to a ceasefire proposal, which Qatar said is almost the same as what Israel had previously agreed to. Israel has now said that all 50 hostages, 20 of whom are believed to still be alive, must be released all at once. President Trump previously explained the difficulty in getting Hamas to release the remaining hostages.
But I always said when you get down to the final 10 or 20, you're not going to be able to make a deal with these people because they use them as a shield. And when they give them up, they no longer have a shield.
And Trump recently said on Truth Social that defeating Hamas is the only way to return the remaining hostages. However, some family members of the hostages believe that Israel's military pressure on Hamas puts the hostages' lives at risk.
There's a deal on the table. This is the opening we need for a comprehensive deal. We must sign it immediately. We cannot support more fighting.
Israeli forces are currently operating on the outskirts of Gaza City, and they recently called up 60,000 reservists for active duty. Residents in Gaza City are continuing to evacuate ahead of Israel's plans to battle Hamas in one of its final strongholds. A local resident shared his experience.
What drove me out is the hunger, the siege, the war, the rockets falling on us, and the drones bombing all night.
However, other residents held protests in Gaza City on Thursday, denouncing the war and repeated displacement. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Hamas of shooting local residents who try to evacuate the combat zones. In another development, an Israeli citizen, Saleh Abu Hussein, who was detained in Lebanon for about a year, returned to Israel on Thursday. Israel said he was released following negotiations with the help of the Red Cross. Israel did not give details on why Abu Hussein was detained. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And joining us now to discuss the latest situation in Gaza is foreign policy specialist David Wormser. He's a Middle East affairs analyst at the Center for Security Policy. David, thank you so much for joining us. As always, great to see you. Now, it is day 2 of Israel's operation to take control of Gaza City. Break down for us Israel's argument for needing this offensive.
Well, their argument is that Hamas has all along demanded conditions that amount to an Israeli surrender. End of war, full Israeli withdrawal, reopening of all the borders. Israel will, under international guarantees, not be able to touch Hamas ever, so that Hamas can rebuild and redo another October 7th. So the Israelis obviously said no, and they were going for a partial deal all along, where at least they get back 10 of the 20 living hostages. But Hamas used the last 4 or 5 months of negotiations to essentially string Israel along. So Israel's losing patience. Hamas released that video about 2 weeks ago showing the starving hostages digging their own grave, which really shook Israel and drove home the point that they don't have any more time to string this along, which led Israel to where it is now, which is basically saying, okay, we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. Either Hamas surrenders and gives up all the remaining hostages, all of them, no more partial deals, without any real negotiation. Or on the other hand, if Hamas still refuses, Israel's ready to go in and finish the job.
And on that note, how important is Gaza City to Hamas?
Well, it's the last major urban stronghold with all the tunnels intact, more or less, and so forth. That's the real sort of center of gravity that remains in Hamas's hands. There are 25% of the territory overall is still in Hamas's hands. But Gaza is a particularly important city, and it also is the last stronghold in the northern third of Israel, of Gaza. So that essentially creates a clean zone for the Israelis, free of all Hamas, north of a certain corridor, which really focuses the remaining Israeli effort in two real narrow areas.
Now, on that last part, Defense Minister Israel Katz approved 60,000 additional reservists to be mobilized, as well as extending orders for 20,000 current reservists. Now, that seems like quite a lot of reservists. Why such a large amount for this operation?
Well, for really two or three reasons. First of all, Israel's army is a reserve-based army. The nation fights as a nation. It doesn't have a very large permanent army because it's not a very large country. It's 10 million people. So it has about 120 to 150,000 people under arms. But that's not sufficient for everything that it's facing. Remember, it's still facing Iran. It's facing a very insecure circumstance in Syria. Hezbollah has been severely damaged, but it's still out there. It's got a very dangerous eastern border, even though it's at peace with Jordan. And it's got a very dangerous southern border, even though it's at peace with Egypt. Egypt has mobilized quite a bit of troops into areas they're not really allowed to be near Israel's border. So Israel needs to maintain a lot of its permanent forces in all sorts of areas across its border, which then demands the need for large amounts of reservists to either take those positions or actually do the fighting in Gaza.
Now, in terms of ending this war, David, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying today that Israel would immediately resume negotiations for the release of all hostages. What is the timeline for getting the hostages out? What is the likelihood of getting them out now?
Well, I think the likelihood is low because the Israeli demands are essentially what they would have to fight for otherwise. And Hamas will more likely say than not, well, why should we give you for free something that we can extract a very dear price for? The Israeli military estimates they'll lose at least 100 soldiers or more going into Gaza City alone. So this is going to be costly. This is going to be dangerous. And of course, for the Israelis, the big fear is that all the hostages will be killed because Hamas has said they will be. So that's the reason why Hamas still has quite a bit of leverage over the Israelis. But again, the Israelis are playing for a full conclusion of the war. They realize if there's a deal, they will not get another chance to finish this, and they cannot leave Hamas in place. So they're demanding both main goals of their war to be met for them not to actually invade the remaining territory. And those two goals are all the hostages released, and B, Hamas gives up all its weapons and gives up government in Gaza and most likely is exiled.
Now, in response to the Israeli offensive, international organizations are warning of humanitarian concerns, with some expecting hundreds of thousands of Gazans set to receive evacuation orders and get displaced. First, do we know how many people are living in Gaza City and where they're set to go?
The Israelis have a pretty good idea of the number. I actually, excuse me, don't, but it is a fairly large number. There are 2 million people in Gaza overall, not in the city, but overall. But Gaza is a very large city. It's the largest city that there was. So there's a lot of people there. I think the humanitarian side, it's really how you look at it. The Israelis look at it as a solution to the humanitarian crisis, because once Hamas is gone, then they can freely distribute aid and reconstruction all over Gaza by the systems they've set up, and that ends any real constriction and so forth. Whereas Hamas has essentially raided these convoys and stored the food and then resells it at exorbitant prices because that's the funding that it needs to survive by. So for the Israelis, taking all of Gaza terminates the humanitarian crisis. Of course, for these international organizations, they're terrified about the use of these civilians as shields by Hamas and the bloodiness that will be between now and then, between now and when it's finished. And third, that there's a very difficult ability to get food to people who are in the middle of a war zone. Now, those areas that Israel controls, which is about 75%, they have distribution places and they're handing out food roughly to the amount of about a meal per Gazan per day for free and safely. But for not all Gazans can get there.
A lot to unpack here for sure. David Wormser, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up at the U.S. Open, the draws have been revealed and are not very favorable for a certain former champion. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in tennis as the men's and women's draw for next week's U.S. Open has been revealed. What stood out to you?
Well, there were a couple. One, if Novak Djokovic is somehow going to win this, he may have to beat 3 of the top 4 ranked players in the world. Now that's 4th ranked Taylor Fritz, who we would only meet in the quarterfinals. 2nd ranked Carlos Alcaraz, who we could meet in the semifinals, and finally number 1 ranked Jannik Sinner, who we would only meet in the finals. Now, granted, he's 10-0 in his career against Taylor Fritz. Now, Alcaraz, he is 5-3 against him, though I do not think that Djokovic actually would be favored this time around. And finally, Sinner has beaten him 5 straight times. Djokovic hasn't even picked up a set in each of their last 3 matches, so he would certainly not be favored in that match. Now, on the other side of the draw, 45-year-old Venus Williams will play 12th ranked Karolina Muchova in the first round. Now, Williams is the oldest U.S. Open singles participant since back in 1981. Muchova, meanwhile, made it to the semifinals in last year's U.S. Open. So this looks like a very difficult match for the former 2-time champion there in Venus Williams. We'll have to see how she does in the first round. She will certainly have the fans behind her, I'm sure of that, though.
Lots at stake. Shifting gears to college football, though, the lawsuit filed by former Northwestern coach Pat Fitzgerald against Northwestern has been settled. Were the terms of the agreement disclosed?
Yeah, we don't actually know the terms, but this case gained national attention a couple of years ago when Fitzgerald was fired after a university investigation found hazing in the program, but no evidence that Fitzgerald knew about it. Now, they originally gave him a 2-week suspension. That was in the off season. Then instead fired him just a few days later after there was an uproar on social media. Now, Fitzgerald released a statement today saying he had no knowledge of any hazing in the program and that he never directed or encouraged it. In any case, he's the most successful coach in Northwestern football history. Had a 110 and 101 record there in 17 seasons, and that was after his career as a linebacker then for Northwestern. He's a star linebacker actually for them. But I will say, Tiff, sometimes when a scandal comes up like this, schools will use it as an opportunity to possibly fire a coach who's not doing well. And he actually was coming off his worst season with Northwestern. They were 111 in 2022, but there certainly was no evidence that that was the reason why. In any case, Fitzgerald is out, but it looks like the lawsuit finally settled.
So, multitude of developments right there.
So it's over.
No sports politics, it seems. Looking at WNBA news, though, the league has announced a new single-season attendance of more than 2.5 million fans.
Yeah, and the old attendance mark was set all the way back in 2002. That was back when the league had 16 teams. They only have 13 right now. Took them 256 games to get there. This year, like I said, 13 teams. Took just 226 games to pass that mark. There's still 2.5 weeks left in the regular season, so great news for the league. It's also somewhat surprising given that their top draw, Caitlin Clark, has been out since July 15 with a leg injury. We still actually don't know when she'll return. Another one of the young stars too, Angel Reese, recently has missed 7 games with an injury of her own. Also, the Connecticut Sun will reportedly sold for a record amount of $325 million, although the league has not actually approved that sale yet. But clearly the league is on the upswing. I mean, previous to this $325 million, which is reportedly is not final yet, the last sale was for less than $10 million, the Atlanta Dream, 4 years ago. So franchise values have gone up, way up in this league. So things are looking up for the WNBA, that's for sure.
You think fans are tuning in just to see if maybe they would show up on court like Caitlin Clark, even though she's injured?
Maybe they, trying to get, that's true. Maybe they get a glimpse of her. They go to the game, maybe they can get an autograph if she's just sitting there doing nothing on the bench. That could be a reason why, but Or maybe they just got a bunch of season tickets in advance of this season, assuming. I mean, last year as a rookie, she did not miss a game. Her 4 years in college, she did not miss a game. So it seemed like a good bet she was going to play. But unfortunately, if you got season tickets this year, you didn't get to see much of her.
Also, since those tickets have risen in prices as well.
Yeah,
Moving to baseball news, though, Dodgers star Shohei Ohtani missed today's game against the Rockies. Did this have anything to do with him being hit by a comebacker last night?
Yeah, according to the Dodgers, no, it was not. They actually said this was a scheduled day off. Now, Ohtani did exit last night's game in the 8th inning, and that comebacker hit him in the 4th inning, so that was while he was still pitching. He then switched over to the DH after being pulled there. Now, Dodgers manager Dave Roberts said Ohtani has a right thigh contusion. He also said Ohtani will be back in the lineup on Friday. Now, with Ohtani out today, the Dodgers still beat the last place Rockies 9-5. Elsewhere today, the Brewers beat the Cubs 4-1 to get back their 7-game lead over the Cubs in the National League Central. Tonight, we've got just 3 baseball games on. Houston and Baltimore. We've got Tampa Bay hosting St. Louis. And finally, we got the oldest rivalry in the game, Red Sox versus Yankees. They'll play at the Bronx Yankee Stadium there. Yankees have suddenly won 5 straight games, but both teams are chasing Toronto still for the first place leads. We both know a certain fan around here that's certainly going to be happy with that 5-game lead, I can tell you that.
We sure do. Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.